Now, Egyptian officials are denying claims by a senior forensic analyst earlier today that there was an explosion on board the Egyptair flight that crashed last Thursday with 66 on board. The anonymous claim was given to the AP news agency, saying analysis of victims' remains pointed to there being possibly a blast on board. Here's our Middle East correspondent, Paula Sleer.
We're now hearing from the Egyptian head of forensics, who denies reports that the initial examination of human remains that have been salvaged from the wreckage point to an explosion on board the flight. The Egyptian Ministry of Justice also says that there are no traces of explosives that would point to any kind of bomb. French investigators say it is too early to reach any conclusive conclusions, and all of them are reacting to earlier statements made by a senior Egyptian forensic expert. He said that human remains found at the site of the wreckage in the Mediterranean Sea point to an explosion on board. Now, he was speaking anonymously because he had not been authorized to talk to the media, and he was saying this because he said he referenced the small size of the body parts. He is part of the official investigating team, and he's personally been to the morgue in Cairo where the body parts are being brought. Forensic officials in Cairo are now sifting through some 23 bags of human remains that have been salvaged from this crash site. And as I mentioned, the body parts are extremely small. The biggest we understand was the size of a palm, and this suggests that there was an explosion according to the initial reports. And if you follow that, then you have some people theorizing that the cause was terrorism. We have heard some Egyptian voices saying they believe this is the case, but again, the official word from the Egyptian investigators is that it's too soon to confirm what brought down the plane. And there are also experts who say that human remains could have resulted in the high-speed water impact. The search continues for the black boxes. These still need to be found, and of course it's a race against time as the batteries on these transmitters expire in about a month. And still missing is the plane's fuselage. So only when those are found and located will we probably have a better picture of what actually happened on that fateful flight.
There are still conflicting reports regarding the final minutes of that ill-fated Egyptair flight. Our correspondent Emily Sue next explains what we do know then.
Based on the bits of information that we have, we can try to piece together and imagine what the last minutes was like on the ill-fated MS-804. And if it was indeed a bomb that detonated in mid-air that caused the plane to go down, well, that would confirm reports of the planes making sudden swerves in the last minute, and as well explain why the pilot behaved the way that he did. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about this incident on a Somali aircraft just back in February. A bomb was also on that plane. It was concealed inside a laptop, and in mid-air it exploded, and the explosions made this hole on the body of the aircraft. But the pilot of that Somali aircraft, he managed to make an emergency landing. And for what I understand, only the suicide bomber who detonated the bomb was killed. But then just last night, according to this new report released by the French TV station M6, they quoted these aviation sources in Paris that say the pilot of the MS-804 also requested to make an emergency landing because of all the smoke that's filling up the aircraft. But of course, that was denied.
Again, that's been denied. There have been so many conflicting reports coming in and out. You hear one thing, then it's denied, but you kind of hear it again, don't you?
Absolutely, Kevin. And since we found out about the MS-804, there's been numerous contradictory reports coming out. It's really hard to have a grasp of exactly what happened. And I'll just give you one example, a very, very significant one, which is Greek authorities. Hours after we found out that the MS-804 vanished, they say the plane made these sudden swerves. First a 90-degree turn, and then a 360-degree turn before it came down. And then the French authorities followed and said that, oh, they have information at hand to say that smoke was detected in several locations of the aircraft, including the toilet and the cockpit, and that would explain why the plane made those swerves. But the Egyptian authorities, again, denied those reports, saying we have no evidence to indicate that.
That is Emily Sue. After the crash, stories started appearing online about this particular Egyptair plane as well. For example, 2 years ago, it was vandalised with a graffiti message. That's now got an extremely chilling resonance too. Back then, someone wrote, "We'll bring this plane down," in Arabic on the underside of the plane. It is thought Cairo airport staff were behind the act of vandalism at the time. The message appears to have been connected to the unstable political situation in Egypt at that time. The words traitor and murderer were also found written on the plane, and through wordplay, directed therefore at Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Look at the ident on that plane. You see the two C's there. Several aviation and security experts shared their thoughts with us on the ongoing investigation.
Even if there was a bomb that blew up and catastrophically destroyed the plane at high altitude, large chunks of it would fall off. The engines, they would stay largely intact. The wings, maybe the tail section, and a big chunk of the fuselage. And we haven't found those bits yet. And once you find those, you can really understand what happened to it. I mean, obviously, the best thing is to get the black box flight recorder, which gives you real technical information. But I really think this is early stage yet. And until they declare that they found the black box and the main parts of the aircraft, a lot of this is all guesswork.
The Egyptians have been saying for a couple of days that they thought a terrorist attack was more likely than any other possibility. However, I did caution against jumping to that conclusion straight away, because basically burns and indications of smoke inhalation, any of those sorts of things that might be picked up by a forensic examination, could have been caused also by an onboard fire. If there was a bomb on this particular aircraft, it's probably not so much an Egyptian problem as a French problem, because the aircraft departed from Charles de Gaulle Airport, and if there was a bomb, then it was either put on in Charles de Gaulle or perhaps Tunisia or one of the previous ports.
Well, let's follow on the French line. The doomed Egyptair flight was reported missing after taking off, as you just heard, from Paris en route to Egypt. RT contributor Anna Baranova has more on the security concerns at Charles de Gaulle Airport.
We're talking about France's largest airport, an international hub alongside such giants as Heathrow. It's one of Europe's largest airports as well. So the question arises, how can security measures be so lax? Where does this information that security levels are lax at the said airport? Well, that's because late last year we've received information that officials there at Charles de Gaulle have discovered that at least 57 employees of the airport with access to runways, to aircraft, were in fact all that time on France's terror watch list. This led to excessive checkups, but none of that actually affected how security control measures took place at the airport. In that respect, nothing changed at all, and that's something that Bernard Cazeneuve, the Minister of the Interior of France, is saying that needs to be looked at very closely at the moment.
Préparation de l'Euro 2016 se poursuit.
After having observed a number of unfortunate mistakes within the security apparatus in place at the Stade de France last Saturday for the Coup de France final, I summoned the organisers in order to examine the measures that needed to be implemented to correct them. I will not accept failure.
Indeed. Security is France's #1 priority at the moment, because there are two major sporting events coming up. Very soon, the Euro 2016, the football championship, that's going to kick off on the 10th of June. And then later on in summer, the Tour de France. Again, flocks and flocks of tourists are going to come in. And they really need to ensure that at least Charles de Gaulle Airport, the country's largest, has to have a stable security system. Officials are now also looking into a possibility of prolonging this state of emergency that's already been prolonged a couple of times since it kicked off in November. They want to make sure that it lasts for the two major events in question that I've just mentioned up until the end of Tour de France, and that's the 24th of July this year.
Our correspondent in Paris. The Egyptair crash comes less than 6 months after a terror attack downed a passenger plane over Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Islamic State terrorists said they carried out that attack, which at the time killed all 224 on board. The majority of victims were Russian holidaymakers, and the plane was heading from the Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh to the Russian city of St. Petersburg. After that, Russia imposed a ban on all flights to Egypt. Thanks for being with us today. Lots still to cover. I hope you can stay with me, Kevin Owen. Austria's election's been a wake-up call to Europe's dominant centrist politicians. After the break, then we'll look at how, even though the far right didn't win the presidency, could still prove to be the springboard they need.